Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Bim's Storytime. It's been a moment, and some things going on, but if you're here, welcome back, little lights, weirdos, wanderers, strangers, freaks, geeks, and all of you other beautiful, unusual people who found your way into this little corner of the dark. Pull up a chair, keep your hands inside the menagerie, and if something underneath your seat whispers your name, ignore it. It only gets worse when you answer. Tonight, we return to the Tale of Little Light. Chapter 10, halfway there. We're going to back up just a couple pages. We kept the lights on. Now, normally this is where I tell you, like, subscribe, ring the beat the logarithm, and perform the usual YouTube crap. Not this time. Want to be honest with you? I don't know how much longer I'm going to continue streaming on YouTube. I may still post here and show videos second, and I may keep some things here going while I figure everything out. YouTube was my first step, a messy, awkward, and, well, unusual step. And it might have been that, but it will always be my first step. And to that, I'll be grateful, especially for the people who stuck around. You know who you are. But if this platform continues to feel like a place where the already famous remain beneath the spotlight while other creators like me and those who have been trying longer and similar themes get left in the dark, then I'm carrying this show somewhere else, and that's going to be Twitch. The Tale of Little Light will return, or I would say will relaunch there from chapter 1 with everything I've learned and everything, every strange little detail and all the little things that I've done to the story and changed the worlds. The story's not really going to end. It's going to reboot, and then we're going to eventually get back to this point where I end up finishing today. And then we're going to continue to the point to where I feel like an arc has cut off, at which point I will probably carry a little heavy on a side story I'm going to start now. That one will become the side story for a while, and then the new chapter will roll in as the side story underneath that. But if you've been around here for a while, I want to say thank you. I'd have a lighter or something, but I don't know where the fuck I put it. Oh well. Thank you for staying around. Thank you for keeping the lights on. Now enough platform bullshit talk. The curtain's waiting, the menagerie is beneath, and somewhere beneath the stage, an old name is trying very hard not to be forgotten. Now, back to the story. Chapter 10.5, or just Chapter 10, we kept the lights on, so let us begin. Bim stood still, caught beneath the orange hush of the tent, watching the master shape the darkness around him. It did not feel like watching someone prepare a room. Ooh, hold on, what's going on? Yeah, that's right, okay. I feel like watching someone prepare a room. It felt like someone watching the room. Double check this. Yeah, I was supposed to ask the daily question. I forgot that, but that's fine. I got busy on other stuff. There's daily question. You don't have to answer. Fine. I just forgot about it because I got caught up in YouTube's nonsense. So, anyways, back to the story. I digress. I apologize. We are on the correct image. That's what I was originally double checking. It felt like watching the room. It felt like watching the room decided what kind of lesson it wanted to become. It felt like watching someone decide what kind of challenge the room was allowed to become. Bim was so caught up in it that when a hand touched the right shoulder from behind, he nearly jumped out of his skin. Hey, bud, a voice whispered, close and far too casual. We're not supposed to, watch. We're, just supposed to run. Bim spun. Gong stood behind him, grinning as though warning someone away from a moonlit death maze. Was just another perfectly normal errand for the day. Restless energy sat in every part of him, in his shoulders, in his hands, the slight bounce of his heels against the floor. Short and quick moving. Gong looked half-dressed for rain and half-dressed for a joke no one else had ever heard yet. His beige trench coat nearly reached his knees. Black boots clicked softly beneath it. A black bowler derby sat neatly on top of his head, and when he wasn't performing, his glasses gave him an oddly thoughtful look, like a professor who had wandered into the circus by mistake and found more interesting things and decided not to leave. A cherry pipe rested near the corner of his mouth, smoke curling sweet and lazily into the dim air. Vanilla and Dutch Cavendish followed him, warm and rich, cutting through the dust canvas with the smell of old wood lamplight and stories told far after midnight. Come on, Gong said, already turning. Follow me. Bim obeyed, though he glanced back once towards the center ring, where Bart continued shaping light and shadow like he was arranging a private storm, only he understood. They moved through the tent, weaving between dim curtains, support poles, and half-seen pieces of apparatuses hanging in the dark. Gong did not slow. Somehow he never quite touched anything. Bim had to duck twice and step over a coil of rope that had not been there a second before. As they walked, Gong began to ask questions. Not hard ones at first, just curious questions. Where did Bib come from? What did what did he think of Thrensible? What did he think of the menagerie? And most of all, what had made him stay? Bim answered, each in kind, his voice softer here in the dark. I came from a small town, I think, from a place called Earth, and a town called Connecticut. He frowned, trying to gather the memory. A place called Connecticut. He frowned, trying to turn the memory properly, as if each piece had to be picked up from somewhere farther away than it ever had been. I remember my dad saying my grandpa bought land a long time ago, and that over the years, my dad kept selling pieces of it off. His fingers brushed the side of his coat as they walked, absently grounding himself with the fabric. He said, that was how we got our money. Or, he hesitated. Most of it. A small shrug. I don't really understand because I didn't know. I just know we had a big house. And adults talked like money actually fixed things. They kept walking. The tent was darker here. Cooler. Canvas sighed faintly overhead, as if the whole structure were breathing in its sleep. Somewhere deeper inside, a rope creaked. Somewhere else, metal clinked softly against metal. Then, the sound vanished into the dark. Bim's voice lowered. There was something in the dark. The words came out, different than the rest, smaller, sharper. Gong did not interrupt. He kept his pace beside him, pipe smoke curling slowly into the shadow, giving Bim the space to keep going if he wanted. In a place built on performance, that silence felt almost like kindness. It started wrong before I knew what was wrong. Or it started wrong before I knew what wrong was. Quiet in a bad way. Doors moving when they shouldn't. The house feeling bigger at night. He swallowed. And then, my dad, the word snagged. He looked like my dad, but not really. His voice sounded like him, but it felt bent, like something was wearing his skin. His fingers tightened against the edge of the sleeves. I remember the burning in my chest when I ran, my feet hurting, my throat hurting. I remember not wanting to look back, because I thought if I did, something would be there. Gong's face slowed. Not enough to stop them, just enough to let the words stay in there a little longer. The darker parts of the tent seemed to lean in around them. Canvas sight overhead. Somewhere out of sight, a pulley clicked once, then went still. The air smelled of pipe smoke, dust, old fabric. That was warm in some places, what was cool in others. Bim looked ahead again. Principle is he hesitated, searching for a word that felt honest without feeling rude. Kinda weird. That earned the slightest sound from Gong. Almost a laugh breathed through the smoke. But, Bim added quickly, there's something warm about this menagerie light. I've spent much of my time with it. Okay, not really, but I know that if he hadn't taken me, I wouldn't be alive. The truth settled between them. Heavy, simple. Gong did not interrupt. He did not soften it. He just walked beside him and let it remain true. Bim kept going, quieter now. The menagerie, then people in it, the lantern light under the moon. His mouth twitched. Dan, the fire evil eater, even Heckles. The tiny, reluctant smile touched his face. They're growing on me. I kind of like it here. Bim looked down for a second, then back up. It's not like playing in the sun or recess at school. It's not like any of that. His voice softened. But there's something better about it. I just, I'm not sure how to say it yet. He took a few more steps, the brim of his hat catching a stripe of dim orange light. As they passed beneath another lantern, then he tried again. Looking at things now, looking back at how things were and where they were going, if it didn't end bad, it was going to end boring. The words came out with surprising clarity. No drama, no bitter, just honest. Or not, no drama, not bitter, just honest. Gong glanced at him sideways over the rim of his glasses. No show, no lights. There would be sun, sure, but what about the fun? What about the freedom? That shifted something in Ben's face. Ooh, I might have read that to the wrong person. My fault. His mouth tightened, not hurt, not angry, just thinking. I'm still young, he said. A small pause between them. But I'm already understanding the idea of working to death. The tent seemed quieter around those words. Even Gong's pipe smoke curled slower just for a moment. Bim looked forward into the dark, towards whatever waited ahead. And it scares me. That landed harder than most things a child should have known how to say. Gong did not answer right away. He only took the pipe from his mouth and let the sweet smoke curl upward beneath them in a thin, lazy ribbon. Then he gave Bim a long look. Not mocking, not playful, just careful. As if the boy had reached into the air between jokes and placed something true there. They continued through the back walls of the tent, moving deeper behind the stage and down beneath the lifted platform in the rear. Here, the air changed. The lantern worm spectacle of the main tent became muffled above them, reduced to a soft thumps through wood, canvas, and hanging rigging. The space beneath the stage was darker, narrower, lined with beams, ropes, crates, and hidden supports that made the place feel like the bones of a performance stripped of its painted face. Dust clung down the wood. Old canvas breathed faintly in the draft. Somewhere overhead, a footfall crossed the boards, footboard crossed the boards, followed by the muted creak of weight shifting through the structure. Gong led the way without hesitation, pipe smoke trailing behind him like a pale ribbon in the dark. Then he stopped. He turned just enough to glance back at Bim over the rim of his glasses. That, said Gong, was a bit deeper than I was expecting. From someone so small. A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. Not teasing, not really. More like approval, carefully designed so it wouldn't scare the boy off. He studied Bim for another beat. The dim, understage light catching the lenses of his glasses with a dull silver flash. Most children, he added, more softly now, fear monsters. You, he lifted the pipe slightly, gesturing with it. You fear becoming ordinary. The word settled into the beams and shadows around them. Bim stood still. The truth of it reached him before any answer did, because that was closer than he wanted anyone getting. Above them, the stage thumped once more. Laughter drifted down, faint and far away, filtered through the wood canvas until it sounded like it belonged to another world. You must be what they call, an old soul. Gong said it lightly, not carelessly. The words lingered beneath the stage, quiet and strange, as if they had found something in Bim worth resting on. Then Gong turned towards what looked like a dead end. Just more tent wall, more canvas, nothing special. He placed his hand against it. Ooh. The surface rippled with light, not outward, but inward. Soft rings of pale gold spread across the fabric like moonlight touching disturbed water. Each one slipped deeper inside of it, as though the tent were remembering how to open itself. Then the wall gave way, and on the other side, a living space. Bim blinked. It was not grand, nor elaborate, but it was alive. The room looked only half lived in, as though someone had moved in fully with their heart and only partly with their hands. Comfort was everywhere. Chairs, a little too large for the brother's size, but clearly theirs. Blankets draped carelessly over furniture. Cups left on side tables. Pipes, books, old little props, mismatched trinkets, and half-finished bits of costume lay scattered across the remains of life too busy being lived in to become tidy. There was no performance in it, no spectacle, just evidence of rest and habits. People returning to the same small warmth, often enough that the room had started to shape itself around them. And yet, nearly everything else felt Bim-sized. The tables did not tower over him. The chairs did not threaten to swallow him whole. The cups, the hooks, stools, even the spacing of the shelves, all of it seemed made for someone small enough not to feel lost inside it. That hit him in a way he did not expect. The brothers were little people in a full-size world. And here, in this little hidden place beneath the stage, they had bent a space of it that would bend for them until it finally fit them. Bim did not know how to act. He stood there with his hat in both hands, and for a few seconds too long, caught somewhere between caution and curiosity. It felt private here, not secret in the way the menagerie usually keeps secrets, much warmer than that. A room with its shoes kicked off, a place where jokes were allowed to end, pipes were allowed to cool, and coats were allowed to hang without becoming costumes. The air smelled faintly of pipe smoke, old fabric, tea gone cool, and something sweet baked long enough to begin a memory of an old meal. A small kettle sat near the back, not quite clean, not quite dirty. One chair had a blanket folded over the arm, with the careless precision of someone who always used the same one. On a nearby shelf, a row of tiny polished shoes sat beside a stack of cards, three cracked teacups, and what looked like a brass wind-up frog, missing one eye. Gong glanced back at him and gave him a small motion towards the room. "Have a seat," he said. "I'll go get my brother, Ngong, and we'll have a moment's rest, and we will speak. When the Master 10 is ready, we will be called. For now, kick your feet up and enjoy yourself." There was something unexpectedly gentle in the invitation. No pressure, no joke, just welcome. Bim looked at the chair nearest him. For once, it looked like it expected him to fit. That simple kindness felt almost more disarming than anything else. With that, Gong crossed the living space. Ooh, I didn't put on a background though. Good job. There we go. Good. Gong across the living space, his boots making soft little sounds against the floorboards. Turn it just a little bit down. E. He passed beneath the hanging lantern. Warm light flashing briefly across the lenses of his glasses, then disappeared down a long hallway at the back of the house. The dimness followed him gently, and Bim was alone. Well, alone enough. The room still had presence. Vanilla tobacco lingered in the air, threaded through old wood, lamp oil, canvas, and something warm from a kitchen not far away. Somewhere deeper in the house, the floorboard creaked, and above him, softened by layers of stages of the tent, came the faintest suggestion of movement overhead. A footstep, a drag of rope, a low groan of boards taking weight. A life continuing just out of sight. Slowly, Bim sat. The chair took him easily. That surprised him more than it should have. His legs did not quite reach the floor, so after a moment he let them swing. The motion, small and absent, something his mind did while the rest of him tried to catch up. He looked around. At the lived-in corners, at the strangely comfortable scale of everything, at the shelves low enough for small hands, at the blanket folded over the same chair so often it had begun to remember the shape of its own owner. The room felt tucked away from the rest of the menagerie, a pocket hidden between heartbeats. And as he sat there, trying to settle, part of his mind drifted backwards, towards memory, towards before, towards his home. The halls, the dark, his mother's voice, his father's face. Wrong. The thought sent something cold through him. Bim swallowed and looked down at his hands. Then away again, as if refusing to look at the memory might keep it from sharpening. He tried to remember the name they had given him. The one before the lantern light, before the forest, before the tent. And then it hit him. He couldn't. Bim froze. His legs stopped swinging. His hands tightened in his lap, small fingers curling into the fabric as quiet shock spread through him. Not panic, not at first, something stranger, something hollower, like reaching into a pocket where something precious should have been and finding only empty space. He knew there had been another name. He knew it had belonged to him. He could feel the shape of its absence, but the sound of it? Gone. The room stayed warm. The house stayed still. And beneath all the quiet, Bim sat very small in the brothers' hiding living space, staring at nothing while the first true weight of losing himself settled into place. He tried again, harder this time, as if effort alone might drag the name loose from wherever it was. Nothing came. No sound. No shape. No hidden thread to pull. Only the act of reaching. Only the blank place where something once belonged. His name was Bim. That was all. The old one his parents had called him, was gone. Or maybe buried too deep. Or possibly changed into something he could no longer reach without tearing at parts of himself he did not know how to maintain. At first, worry stirred in his chest, sharp, quick, and cold, but it did not stay, because slowly, almost strangely, another thought rose to meet it. It's just a name. The words were small and simple, but they settled deeper than they should have, not because they erased the loss, because they gave it somewhere to sit without swallowing him whole. He looked down at his hands, then out into the quiet of the room. The brothers' hidden home held still around him, all warm wood, low shelves, cooling pipe smoke, and little things made for little hands. For the first time since entering, it did not feel unfamiliar. It felt like it had made space just for him. Bim drew a small breath. I am Bim. He said it quietly, firmly. Not like he was trying to convince the room, like he was trying to leave the word somewhere they could not be taken. From the long hallway, Gong and Gong returned together, chuckling softly between themselves. Their laughter bounced slightly off the walls before they stepped fully back into the room. But the moment they saw Bim's face, the humor faded. They looked at him, then at each other, then back to him again. We know that face, they said at the same time. Gong's voice softened first. Not playful now, not testing. Just gentle in the quiet way some people become when they realize a joke was walked in, or when a joke has walked into grief and taken its hat off. That looked. That looked. When something once important is suddenly gone. Gong nodded, more solemn now. That is one of the effects of the menagerie, Nong said. When we arrived here, we give part of ourselves. That is the unspoken deal. A quiet pause settled over the room, not empty or weighted. The little house remained warm around them, but the warmth felt different now, less like comfort and more like a lamp burning in a place where darkness had leaned to wait politely outside its glass. Gong adjusted his glasses. It was a small motion, careful and ordinary, but Bim could tell it was not really for seeing better, it was for having something to do. We will not ask what you are struggling with, Gong said. Gong's voice gentled beside him. But you may tell us, if you wish. There was a moment of silence between them. Every episode, that ear falls off. So funny. Start leaning sideways. That's fine. Every episode. That's so funny. It's just part of the theme at this point. Gong began. Wait, hold on. Yeah, I jumped a little spot. But you could tell us if you wish. There was a moment between them. That's fine. So, okay. Gong began, then stopped. The word caught somewhere in him. Gong looked over at his brother, then lowered himself into one of the chairs with a quiet breath. We kind of had to give up leaving. Gong sat nearby. For a moment, both brothers seemed older than they had only seconds before. Not bigger, not less strange, just older, as if the laughter they wore so easily had stepped aside and let something truer sit in the room with them, only for a moment. Once upon a time, Gong said, long, long ago, older than your parents, your grandparents, and even theirs, there was a small town once marked on the map. Gong's gaze drifted. Not towards the room, past it, then through it, as if the walls themselves, the lanterns, and the hidden stage above them had all become thin enough for him to see something on the other side. Something gone. Something he still knew the shape of. Lumen Vale. Gong gave a small nod. From a small town called Storybrooke, the brothers of three were we. The phrase landed with the shape of something old. Not just memory, a telling. A kind of thing passed from mouth to mouth until even the sad parts learned where to breathe. Gong interrupted, quieter now. We were not always the brothers Gong and Gong. We were once normal, like you. That sat differently, because until then, Bim had not fully thought of them as having a before. They had seemed like part of the menageries machinery, like motion, like timing, almost like laughter with feet. But somehow, they were sitting in chairs too small for the rest of the world and too perfect for them, speaking of maps, towns, and names that did not belong to the ring. Gong looked over again, his voice softening further. But then, there was our brother, Walter. The living space between the stage. Hold on. Yeah. The room seemed to tighten around it. The living space between the stage felt warm and lived in only moments ago, took a different shape now, not colder, but sadder, even as if Walter's name had entered with him and quietly taken a seat. Even the small domestic sounds seemed to pull away from it. A faint creak of the house, the muffled movement above, the lazy tick of something brass on a shelf. It all became dull, almost careful. Bim said nothing. He only listened. Hat still in his lap, fingers resting against the brim, while the brother sat across from him with the weight of old years with the weight of old years under their eyes. Whatever came next, it was not going to be a funny story. He was not small like us, Gong said. In fact, some might have called him a giant. A faint smile passed over Gong's face, fragile with memory. He stood 8 foot 11 inches that drew the ghost of a laugh from the brothers, soft, thin, yet real, the kind of laugh that rises only because grief has learned to keep an old affection folded in its pocket. We had a different act back then, Gong said. More total opposites. Walter would toss us up through random stunts, rings of fire, running circles, throwing us upwards towards floating platforms, throwing us up towards the floating wheel, his eyes lowered into his hands. For a moment, Bim almost seen it. 2 small brothers flying through lantern light. A giant laughing beneath them. Ooh, yeah, I'm way behind on pictures. I'm sorry, guys. I keep getting caught up in reading, but we'll take a moment. This is where we should be. I just realized that looking over. Anyways, I digress. 2 small brothers flying through lantern light. A giant laughing beneath them. The crowd gasping. The cheering. Trust disguises danger. Danger disguises play. Gong's smile trembled. God, I miss him. Indeed, Nong said. His voice nearly broke on the word, and he covered it by adjusting the cuff of his sleeve. Bim leaned forward just a little, hat still forgotten in his hands. What happened? The brothers looked at one another again, not because they did not know how to answer, because they both knew, and neither wanted to be first. Then, quieter this time, they answered together. Like we said, we have been here a really, really, really long time. Gong folded his hands in his lap. After being here for about a generation, our oldest brother wanted to go home. He was homesick. The words came out plain, almost too plain, like the room itself understood what making it prettier could make it less true. Gong continued, his eyes lowered now, his voice steady only because he was forcing it to be. And we had started to notice something strange. The people who used to come see us were no longer around. Gong looked down at his hands. We didn't understand what that meant. Not really. So we kept the lights on. We kept the show going. We kept moving forward. The line landed like a confession. Not dramatic, nor loud. Just the plain truth of people performing through what they did not yet know how to face. Bim looked between them, trying to understand the shape of it. A generation. A town. People coming, then suddenly not coming. Names becoming fewer. Faces missing from the crowd without anyone saying the word of why they're gone. Gong picked up the thread. But our brother, he was beginning to falter. He was getting sick. So we thought. He swallowed. The room held still around him. The pipe, the blankets, the scattered props, the cup left on the table. All the stubborn signs of life suddenly felt like things left behind by people who had spent a very long time learning how to keep going after something broke. So we thought, Gong said quietly, sparing him the next words, that perhaps home would fix what this place could not. Neither of them looked at Bim when they said it. They were looking somewhere older than their room. Somewhere with roads, with weather, with doors that opened into streets they had once known by heart. With a brother too large for the world they had built beneath the stage. In the silence that followed, Bim could already feel the shape of the answer before they gave it. Home had not been waiting for them. Maybe taking him home would help, Gong said. Gong loaded slowly, or nodded slowly. He was always clammy, like he had a cold that never caused him to sneeze, always sweating, like something had him in its grasp. Long glanced towards the floor, his expression tightening. He would sit near the door sometimes, he said. Outside it, near it, like part of him had already started walking, and the rest of him was too tired to follow. Gong's mouth moved once before he found the words. He missed rain. That simple thing made the room feel smaller. Bim did not know why. Maybe because rain sounded like something no one should have to miss. So, we asked the boss. Gong corrected him quietly. The big boss, Renzabule. Gong gave a small nod, and we asked if we could leave, and he told us, I never said you couldn't. But he also pointed out, Gong said, his voice dropped lower now, that we have been here a very, very long time, and that we may want to take account for this. Neither brother smiled now. The little house seemed to hold itself carefully around them, every blanket, pipe, cup, and chair suddenly too gentle for the story being told. We didn't know, they both said. The words landed flat and terrible. Not because they lacked feeling, because it had been felt far too many times already. Gong's eyes drifted somewhere far beyond the room. So, we sent our brother beyond Mr. Crendle's ticket booth, thinking it would be better for him. Gong's voice cracked. We were wrong. The room went still. Even the faint sounds beneath the stage seemed to pull back, as if the house itself had learned to be quiet when this part of the story came. Bim's fingers tightened around the rim of his hat. He did not ask another question. He could feel the answer was already walking towards him. Like he knew what was coming, Gong said, barely above a whisper. Our brother walked past the ticket booth and waved goodbye. Gong pressed his hands over his mouth, and then... Wait, what happened? Oh, that's right. I don't know. See, I'm slow with the picture thingy. I gotta remember to mark that. That's fine. It's my last one here. We're doing this mainly, but we'll be on Twitch and doing better. And regress. Like he knew what he was committing, or like he knew what was coming. Gong said, barely above a whisper. Our brother walked out past the ticket booth and waved goodbye. Gong pressed a hand over his mouth, and then his eyes widened and then started watering. Gong looked at the floorboards, jaw tightened as though he were trying to hold the next image in place long enough to survive saying it. He aged. The word sat there, too simple for what it meant. Not slowly, Gong went on, his voice thin now. Not like a person should. Not like years passing. Like time remembered him all at once. Gong's shoulders drew inward. 1 second he was there, then next. He swallowed hard. He was older. The room seemed smaller now, as if grief had a way of pulling walls closer. Bim could almost see it without wanting to. A giant man beneath the glow of the booth. One hand lifted, a goodbye caught in the air, the shape of him changing before the hand even lowered. His skin changed first, Gong said softly. Then, his back, his hands, his face, everything started catching up. Gong shut his eyes. All the years we had missed, he whispered. All the years the menagerie had been holding back. Gong nodded once, and when he looked at us, his voice nearly failed. He understood before we did. And he understood, Gong whispered, before we did. Tears slipped free. He wiped it away too late for it to matter. He looked at us like he already knew there was no fixing it. Bim said nothing. He couldn't. He sat with his hat in his lap, fingers curled against the brim, staring at the brothers as the shape of their horror began to settle in. Not a monster, nor claws, nor blood against pink cloth. Just time. Time as cruelty. Time as debt. And suddenly the menagerie felt different again. Not just refuge, not just spectacle, a place that kept people alive by keeping something else waiting at the door. Gong's voice went smaller. His body broke down into shards of sand. The room fell into silence. It felt hard and absolute, the kind that arrived when words no longer carry enough weight for what they mean. Bim pictured a giant hand lifting in goodbye. The skin loosening, the shoulders folding, a body too large for the world becoming smaller and smaller by the second, not by shrinking, but by losing. The floor, the air, the space between the ticket booth and home, all of it hungry with years. The brothers looked at each other, then together, almost like they were answering a question far too late. Time. The word did not echo. It sank. None of us knew, Gong said. But we were warned, said Gong. It was not direct, he added. And he understood, Gong said, before we did. A tear slipped free. He wiped it away too late for it to matter. He took a look at us. He already knew there was no turning back at all. There was absolutely nothing he could do. He just continued to wave. His body broke down into shards of sand. Bim pictured a giant hand lifting goodbye one more time. Walter standing beyond Mr. Crindle's booth, almost home, almost free, while every year the menagerie had held back came rushing towards him all at once, skin loosening, shoulders folding, hands changing, a body too large for the world becoming smaller and smaller simply because it aged it to the floor. So I guess I will ask, Gong said, if you are willing, Bim. He let the question breathe, not forcing it, not cornering him, giving the silence room to decide whether it wanted truth. What did you give? Bim sat very still. The room around him felt smaller now, tighter somehow. Full of old grief, borrowed names, and the terrible shape of bargains no one fully understood until way after it had already been paid. When he answered, his voice was small, but not weak. I'm probably behind on it here. I can't remember. He looked down at his hands, at the fingers resting inside the brim of the hat, at the place where they tightened just slightly without his permission. His throat moved once. I know there was something, he said, quieter now. Something important. His eyes stayed on the hat. The name I had before. The words sounded strange out loud, as if saying them made the loss feel more real than feeling it. I've tried to remember it, he swallowed, but it's just gone. Not stolen, not torn away, gone in a way that felt somehow worse, like it had slipped beneath the surface of him so completely there was no edge left to grab. The room stayed quiet. No one rushed to fill it. No one tried to comfort him too quickly. Gong only sat a little stiller. Gong leaned in to his brother's side, one hand resting against his own knee, his fingers curled as if they were holding on to something old and invisible. Far above them, the stage gave another soft creak. Then, even that faded. Bim sat with the truth of his first name in front of the people who understood what it meant to lose something you could never fully get back. Not death, not exactly, but close enough to ache in the same way. I can't remember the name given to me by my mom or my dad. His voice wavered around those words. He could still picture his mother, not perfectly, not the way he wanted to, but enough to hurt. A shape of the edge of warmth, a voice that had once meant safety before the house learned how to wear it wrong. And I remember their faces, he said. His fingers pressed into the brim of his hat. I remember the world outside. I remember the halls, the kitchen, the dark, the forest. He stopped there. His throat tightened. I just can't remember my name. He lifted his head. His eyes found the brothers. Beyond Bim. That landed on the brothers like a lantern being sat down in the middle of the dark. Not loud, but enough to change the entire space. Gong gave a slow nod, his eyes resting on Bim with more understanding now than before. Not pity, but recognition. So, you gave a piece of who you are? He leaned back into his chair, pipe resting now in one hand, the last thread of smoke curling faintly upward. That stings. But I believe that is normal for a Threnza. I think it's simply part of the effect of becoming what you accepted to become. Bim looked down again. Accepted. That was a strange word for it. He had not remembered signing anything. He had not shaken a hand. No one had placed a paper in front of him and asked for a name. And yet, somewhere between the house, the forest, the lantern light, and Threnzable's impossible smile, something indeed had happened. Something had answered. Maybe him. Maybe the part of him that wanted to live badly enough to become anything that could keep on going. Gong nodded along, his hands folded neatly now that tears had begun to settle, and his breathing has evened out. That is what this place is about. It's not just some eternal carnival. I mean, okay, it is, but it's grander than that. Better lived in than any carnival could ever have possibly hoped to be. Gong lifted a finger. It's more like an ever-changing theme park / hybrid circus. Bim tilted his head. I haven't seen any rides, he said. That pulled a real laugh from the brothers. Not the thin kind from before. This one had air in it, warmth, a little room to stand. That, Gong said, is because you haven't seen everything yet. The warmth of that answer lingered, not because it was funny, because it carried promise. For the first time since the conversation had turned towards loss, the space between the stage felt less like a place where things came to die and more like a place where hidden things waited to be found. And Bim, still sitting there with his hat in his lap and the ache of an old name he could no longer reach, felt something loosen in his chest. Not healed, not fixed, but something steady, as if maybe who he had been was not the only self he would ever get to know. Gong gestured vaguely outward with his pipe, as if the rest of the menagerie sprawled endlessly just beyond its walls. There is much more here than any measly one visit could ever occur. Tents inside tents, roads that behave when they feel like it, performances, games, houses, thresholds. Places you only find when you're meant to. Gong leaned forward, warming to the subject now. Some doors only open if you are lost enough. Some only open if you are honest enough. Some, unfortunately, open because they think it would be funny. Gong squinted at him over the brim of his glasses. I bet you haven't even met the Threnza of Beauty. Bim laughed and shook his head. Definitely not. Gong perked up once. Now, there's a sight. She is pretty. Gong gave him a long, sideways look. Gong looked at both hands. What? I'm allowed to notice beauty. She is a Threnza of it. That made Bim smile despite himself. Small at first, then real. Gong pressed a hand into his chest with theatrical sincerity. She puts a smile on her face, just from being recognized. That pulled the giggle out of Bim before he could stop it. Is that so? Well, perhaps I will get to meet her one day. You probably will, Gong said, if the menagerie likes you enough. I think it does. The line settled warmly. Not as a promise, more like a quiet welcome from the place itself. Bim looked towards the wall without meaning to, as if the hidden house might answer for the menagerie. It did not, but the lantern light held steady. The shelves remained low. The chair still fit him. After everything they had said about cost, about debt and loss, that felt like an answer in all of its own. Then Gong stepped away from the seating area and crossed to a small side table tucked near the wall. When he returned, he carried a tray balanced with surprising care, a teapot, 3 cups, a small plate of crackers. Each piece was arranged in a solemn precision of a man transporting state secrets through hostile territory. He set it down between them with a tiny flourish. We may be weird, we may be comedic, but that does not mean we don't have class. Gong nodded gravely. We are professionals. Professionals with crackers. The highest kind. Bim smiled. Not because the ache was gone, it totally wasn't, but because the room had made space for it without asking him to become only that ache. Gong began pouring the tea. The soft stream made a small soothing sound as it met each cup. Steam curled upward in pale ribbons, carrying a faint herbal sweetness into the room. It mixed with the smell of vanilla, tobacco, old wood, lamp oil, and warm cloth under the whole space that just felt gentler than before. Gong nudged the plate towards Bim. Eat one before Gong explains the tea leaves. It's safer that way. I explain only when necessary, Gong says. You explain when awake, which is often necessary. Bim took a cracker. For the first time in a while, he felt it again. Not fear, not pressure, not the sharp, restless hum of being watched. Something quieter, something almost dangerous in its softness. Comfort. It slipped into him carefully, settling into a hollow places the night had carved out. And the warmth of tea and steam, in the lived-in room beneath the stage, in the casual way the brothers made space for him without demanding he fill that space too quickly. For a moment, he could almost forget how strange everything was. Almost, and maybe that was the strange part of it all, because a menagerie was still very much impossible, still very much moving, still full of bargains, missing pieces, old grief, and light that knew too much. But here, the scene curling between them and the brothers treating the tea like ceremony, it felt less like a place that had stolen him and more like a place that was teaching him how to stay. That same feeling returned. The one he had felt the night he had ran the Thrensible in the woods. The warmth. The welcome. The quiet steadiness of the lantern light that did not ask him to prove himself before it touched him. It settled over the room gently, as if the space had decided he belonged there. Bim wrapped both his hands around the cup. The ceramic was warm against his fingers, a little too warm at first, but not enough to hurt. He held on anyway, letting the heat sink into his palms, into his knuckles, into the small places that had been clenched for too long. The tea smelled faintly of herbs, honey, and something floral he could not name. It was not the kitchen from home. It was not his mother's hands, not morning light through familiar windows, but it was still warm. And for now, warm was enough to keep him sitting there, enough to make the tight thing in his chest loosen before he even realized he had been holding it. As they drank, the conversations loosened with it. Small questions came small answers. Favorite foods, favorite acts. Whether Bim liked crowds or the attention they gave. Whether Gong had always smoked the same pipe. Whether Gong always sounded like he was halfway to revealing secrets and simply kept deciding not to. The talk drifted back and forth with an ease that made the room feel softer. Not the softness of silence, the softness of being allowed to exist without being tested every single second. Bim learned that Gong took his tea bitter and pretended it was refinement. Gong preferred honey and claimed it was for balance, though Gong called it cowardice in liquid form. They argued about this for nearly a minute, with such grave seriousness that Bim almost forgot they were ancient performers who had once watched time take their brother apart just outside a ticket booth. Eventually, Bim set his cup down. The ceramic made a soft sound against the table. "I'm here to train." He looked between them. "So, what is it we're doing today?" This time Gong answered first. "We will be training you." He leaned forward slightly, hands clasped together with a gentle expression, but no less serious. "On how to ignore humiliation or how to survive it," Gong added. Gong nodded once. "We will be doing an obstacle course. One designed to break you down and pick you back up." The word should have sounded cruel. In another room, from another mouth, they might have, but here, at tea and Walter, and the quiet understanding of what the menagerie took from people, they sounded like a warning given before a storm. Not to frighten him, but to help him brace. Bim looked down at his cup, then back at them. "What kind of humiliation?" Gong and Gong looked at each other a little too long. Then Gong smiled, not meanly. That somehow made Bim feel worse. "The memorable kind," he said. As they drank, the conversations once again loosened a little more. On to favorite foods and favorite acts. On to more details about Gong's pipe. Allowing time to pass for a little longer. Allowing everything to continue throughout the room, with the exception of silence. One second. Okay. Gong nodded once. "We will be doing an obstacle course. Okay, I already said that. Sorry. Apologize. I just pressed the same part twice. Nice job. On. Okay. In this tent, you will trip. You will look foolish. You will be seen falling." A faint smile touched Gong's mouth, and then You will keep moving, Gong added. That is the lesson. Not how to avoid embarrassment, not how to seem perfect, but how to remain yourself when dignity slips. Bim sat very still, listening. The words settled somewhere deeper than he expected, because he already knew a little of what that feeling was now. The hot sting of being looked at, laughed at, measured, doubted. He remembered the eyes on him in the ring, the way a crowd could feel enormous even when no one touched you. The way laughter could land wrong, even when it was not meant to hurt. The way his own body could become something he wanted to hide from, just because others were watching it fail. And he survived it, barely, but still. So, Bim said slowly, glancing between them, the point is not to stop looking stupid. The corners of Gong's mouth twitched. No, he said, that would be impossible, especially here. That got a soft laugh from Nong. The point, Gong said, is learning that looking foolish doesn't mean you are broken. Bim looked down at his hands, at the cup, at his hat, at the table between them, where tea, crackers, grief, and instructions had all somehow found room to sit together. Above them, the stage creaked softly, a reminder that somewhere overhead the menagerie was moving, still watching, still waiting. And there beneath the stage, with tea cooling between them, the hush of the performance above, Bim began to understand that the tent of humility was not built to make him smaller. It was built to show him what could not be taken from him, even when everyone saw him fall. It was built to make sure nothing else could. Bim let that sit for a moment. Then he looked back at the brothers. Gong answered first, dry as dust. Expect to possibly eat dirt. Nong chimed in immediately. I'd get cheered at for it. Bim stared. The brothers nodded together, as if this was not only reasonable but entirely obvious. Do not get upset, Nong said, lifting a finger. That part matters. Yes, Nong said. Very, almost sounded like Friendsberg on, very important. The crowd may laugh. Let them. Bim's mouth tightened a little. Not quite a frown, nor fear. More like he was already imagining the taste of dirt and the sound of strangers enjoying it. Gong leaned in slightly, his glasses catching a dim flicker of lantern light. It is all about the show. Mistakes happen. Falls happen. Mistiming happens. But don't continue on strong. This is what lets performers live without halting to full stop. Gong picked up the thought with a small nod. This training is for poor movement, bad step, the drop prop, the missed landing, the second where everything could fall apart. If you let your feelings get there first. Gong pointed lightly towards Bim's chest. The flow must never stop. Gong looked back at once, even if you are eating dirt. That pulled the faintest laugh from Bim, small, careful, but still there. Gong noticed and gave a satisfied nod, as if that tiny sound counted as a successful warm-up. Good, he said. Laughing before the dirt means the dirt has less power. Bim looked at him. That sounds made up. It totally is. Gong smiled, but it's also very true. But real. It is not about one of us, Gong said. It's about all of us. If an act feels impossible, Gong added, then, for that moment, it only feels that way. If you fail, Gong said, get back up. Dust yourself off, he continued. And get back to it, Gong finished. The words passed between them with the rhythm of something practiced, something said before, something meant every time, not a speech, not a lesson dressed up to sound pretty. A rule, a way of surviving a stage. Bim sat still, listening, the teacup cooling in his cup and the warmth of the room settling around the edges of the conversation. Above them, somewhere beyond beams and floorboards, the tent still lived in its own life. Feet moved overhead, ropes creaked. A muffled cheer rose from faded like, a muffled cheer rose, then faded like weather passing over a roof. But down here, beneath the performance, this felt like the truth of it, not perfection, recovery. Never falling. Or not never falling, not refusing to stay down, but continuing to get back up. He looked between them, quieter now, more focused. So the point, he said slowly, isn't to never mess up? Gong's mouth twitched. No, he said. Gong smiled. The point is learning how to mess up without letting the mistake become the whole show. Bim looked towards the hallway, then back at the little table between them, tea, crackers, 2 old performers, a hidden room built to fit people the outside world had not bothered making room for. He nodded once. Small and serious. I think I understand. Gong and Gong looked at each other. Then together they grinned. No, Gong said. But you're about to, he finished. Gong. It's going to make sure the mistakes don't own you. And that, more than the obstacle course, more than the laughter, more than the humiliation, that made sense to Bim, because he already knew what it felt like to be caught in the moment that wanted to define him. The house had tried it. The forest had tried it. The ring even tried it. Even his missing name had attempted to, in its own quiet way, to make him nothing but an empty space it left behind. But he was still sitting there, still holding the cup, still listening, still very much Bim. Maybe that was why the tent of humility had opened up for him at all. Gong lifted his teacup. Failure is only real when the moment stops. The words lingered there, simple, practical, yet true. Somewhere above them, muffled through wood and canvas, something shifted in the tent overhead. A rope drew tight, a platform groaned. Something rolled across the stage with a slow, hollow sound, then stopped, as if the obstacle course itself were listening, waiting, breathing in the dark until it was time to begin. They continued talking for a while after that, not about anything too heavy at first, small things again. The sort of conversation that makes strangers feel less like strangers. The tea helped, the warmth helped more, but the brothers helped most of all. There was something about the way they spoke, half performance, half honesty, that made the room feel softer around its edges, like Bim had not had to brace for every single sentence. Eventually, though, the dark drifted where it had always been heading, to the course. Not all at once, not like a lecture, more like an old performance talking shop, sharing scars without needing to roll up their sleeves to prove they had them. Gong set down his cup first. And that is the end, and right before the beginning of my next chapter, where we won't pick up for a minute because I'm restarting back on Twitch. But if you made it this far, thank you. I'm going to go be not pink and get this all off. We're going to come back and draw something. But I'm going to close it the way I always do. If you made it this far, thank you very much. Remember, be safe, be careful if you're flying, if you're somehow getting this on a boat, because I'm in the middle of America broadcasting this shit. If you're in an airplane, remember, take your time, make it home. Somebody loves you. And until next time, be safe. Have a good night, everybody.